FM. We are talking with Jeff Williams as the current bass player from Onslaught. Thanks for meeting us today.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. Great to be here.
Fantastic. All right, well, you joined the band in about 2005. I was sort of wondering what was your history before that?
Before that, I played in various bands, different sort of styles, everything from hair metal back in the 80s, which was which was fun. Then I was in a more like Black Crowsy kind of thing, I guess, a band called the Wild Family.
Okay.
And we were signed on that, did a few tours, and had a single that reached number 121 in the UK charts.
Oh, yes. Right. What was the band called again?
Band was called the Wild Family.
The Wild
Family. It's very, very not Onslaught.
Okay. I'll see if I can find it.
And then when Onslaught took its first extended hiatus, shall we say, after In Search of Sanity, I was in a band with Nige called the Power Junkies, which was more of a a traditional heavy metal band, rather than a thrash metal band. So we made a few high-end demos with those, played a few gigs. But like I said, the other band that I was playing in at the same time, Wild Family, got signed. So I moved on and spent more time with those. Years later, I was working in a music shop in Cardiff, and somebody brought in an Onslaught poster for a gig in Bristol. Seen the email address on there, got in touch. Just put a jokey sort of message. Didn't know who it was actually going to. Just saying, hey, great to see the band back together. If you're ever looking for a bassist, haha.
Oh, okay.
And within Nige got back to me and went, it's funny you should say that, mate. And at that point, I hadn't actually played bass for 12 years.
Oh, okay.
So I hurriedly had to buy a bass, start to play it again, and learn where to put my feet on stage. Yeah, so that's basically happened, and nearly 20 years later.
Were you familiar with their music much before that?
Yeah, I was aware of that whole scene. I was very much involved in the music genre, and a lot of my mates were seriously into the thrash metal scene, so their name came up quite often. I wasn't overly familiar with the music, but I certainly knew the name, and obviously was familiar with the better known tracks, shall we say.
All right. Well, confession.
Yeah. Sorry, sir?
I'll confess, the only Onslaught I've got, it's on vinyl. It's the In Search of Sanity album.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually brought that when it came out for some reason. I think a friend recommended it to me, and I think Steve Grimmett was on it, who I was sort of familiar with, so I gave it a go.
Yeah. I think that was I was talking to the band's manager, who's from New Zealand, and he was telling me that In Search of Sanity was widely distributed in Australia and New Zealand, so that was probably most people's introduction to Onslaught over there.
Many years ago, I wrote to some English fanzine in the 80s, and I said, do you need a Aussie correspondent? And they said you wouldn't have heard of these bands like Onslaught and Sabbath and stuff, but no, we had them we did have them in the record stores here. So
okay, that's cool. Very cool.
So what have you enjoyed playing from their old catalogue?
Well, strange enough, talking about In Search of Sanity, I've always enjoyed playing Shell Shock. It's I think the way that the band plays it live compared to the album's got a lot more aggression. But I just like the riff, as a bass player, it's a great song to play. And I think it's just got a lot of energy, So there's that one I love from the old catalogue. Flame of the Antichrist is a great track to play as well, because it's got some nice complicated sort of changes and bits and pieces in there. So it's a lot more challenging. But when you get in the groove, that's a fantastic song to play as well.
The album cover here from the Onslaught, The Origins of Aggression, and there seems to be a lot of. It's a very interesting cover. It seems to be showcasing a lot of difficult times in England.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Well, I don't know if you were aware, but I did the artwork for that album.
Very good.
and the brief was basically, or the idea that I had was, as it was called, Origins of Aggression. There was a certain zeitgeist going on in the UK at the time. There was a lot of riots. There was a poll tax riot, and there was a lot of football violence and everything in the news all the time. It was a very, it was kind of like an angry sort of time in the UK. So so I thought it'd be great to get images of events that were going on at the time. So most of the images on the cover are from the poll tax riots back in the 80s, and also, a lot of the football sort of hooliganism that was going on at the time as well, just to capture, just to give a bit of historical context of what was going on.
Yeah, because a lot of that stuff did make news in Australia. So, yes, I'm familiar. So, have you designed any other album covers?
Yeah, well, what for Onslaught?
Yes, Onslaught and other bands.
Not that many. A few. I've done Broken Teeth. No, yeah, Broken Teeth covers. This is a band with Jason McMaster in Texas. I've done some of his stuff. Some other bands in America whose name eludes me right now. But with Onslaught, I did. Let's think. Well, basically, I've done everything since Killing Peace,
Okay.
apart from Six. No, we had a great guy doing the cover for Six, but all the other graphics around that I did. So all the content, the sleeves, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so the forthcoming album, it sees a lot of older material being re-recorded. Now, I did an interview with Udo from Accept a while back, and he's re-recorded the whole Balls from the Wall album.
Right.
And there's always that question, is this a good idea to go re-recording classic material?
Well, the reviews that we've had back have been telling us that it has been. But the whole thing with this is basically, as it's the 40th anniversary of the first album, Power from Hell, this year, we decided rather than re-record the album, in completion, that it would be a more interesting idea to do a series of some of the more important Onslaught tracks from the first three albums as like a sonic history lesson of the band. But then on the second disc, do a series of cover versions of bands that influenced the band to pick up their instruments and play in the first place. So the bands that basically were the ones that inspired the guys to actually form Onslaught and then go on to record Power from Hell. An in-depth thing, like I said, it was a bit more of a history lesson and a bit of an insight of what was actually going on during that period. As reflected in the album cover as well. So we just thought it'd be an interesting package to celebrate the album rather than just re-recording it. Absolutely. But the reviews have been great. Everybody seems to like it. Obviously some people like some tracks more than others, but yeah, we're very happy with it.
It seems to be happening quite a lot. It's not only with Udo. I think there's a whole Triumph, the Canadian band Triumph. I think they've re-recorded a lot of stuff with special guests like Sebastian Bach and Dee Snider. So that'll be interesting when that comes out.
Some albums, I guess, are absolute 100% classics and should never ever be touched. But in general, I think if the artist thinks that they have something to bring to their tracks, then why not?
Absolutely. So I notice there's a lot of some of the songs that have been covered. There's some punk songs. So do you have much of an interest in punk yourself? I mean, that would have.
I love punk. Punk was when I was a kid growing up in Abertillery, which is a tiny little sort of valley town in South Wales. Punk was the first music that made me change the way I dress. I was a huge Sex Pistols fan back then, and so punk was a massive influence.
Yeah, I think it was Malcolm Dome once said probably one of the most. The Nevermind the Bullocks could actually be considered one of the most influential albums on heavy metal.
I completely agree. I mean, it's it's a strange, it's a strange time because basically, you had punk and then you had heavy rock, And then there seemed to be like a bit of a divide between the two. But then I think everybody kind of discovered Motorhead, who obviously were going, and that amalgamation of punk and rock became thrash,
Yeah,
and then the whole thing just emerged from there. So no punk, no thrash, no Motorhead, no thrash. So it was a very interesting time.
very true. I think there's probably no two genres of music with such a love-hate relationship, shall we say.
Yeah.
Oh, what are the songs from? I think you've covered. You've got okay, Iron Fist by Motorhead.
Yes, indeed.
You covered that.
Okay, well, to put the songs in context, Nige is the founding member of Onslaught. He chose the songs to go on the album, as like I said, they were the songs that influenced him to pick up the guitar, to form the band, which eventually obviously led to the first album and beyond that. So he picked the songs that were special to him. And if you buy the vinyl or the CD, every track has a series of notes that explains exactly why that track has been picked and the story behind it. So none of it's random. It's all it's all. So I mean, if you want to take an example, Judas Priest, "Free Will Burning" sounds like a bit of a strange choice, but it was actually the first time that Nige sat down with his guitar and learnt a solo from start to finish, and it was that solo that he learned.
So what would be a song you'd like to cover in the future? Any thoughts?
Me? Oh, good grief. There are so many. I've got such a varied sort of taste in music. I like it when people take genres and mess around with them. So maybe a Tom Jones track or something like that would be good
Okay,
fun.
it's not unusual. Okay,
There you go. There you go.
all right.
That's it. It's on.
What have you in re-recording some of the older Onslaught tracks? What do you think you've been able to bring to them?
But I think as the current lineup, then, if you like, there's more aggression. I think there's obviously modern production does make a difference, and I think there's just a lot more energy and a lot more aggression, separation in the tracks. So you can hear what's going on a lot more. If we didn't want to alter anything too much, we wanted to keep the original sort of zeitgeist that was that was from the passion that was in the songs from when they were recorded, but just modernize the production, basically just make them more aggressive, more sharper, and more in your face. And I think I think we've done a good job of doing that.
Absolutely. So you've had a lot of experience in the recording studio over the years. What are some of the more changes that have come up technology-wise?
Oh, digital. It's simple as that. A lot of cutting and pasting. For example, it's rare nowadays that you get a band sitting in the studio all together, recording the album all together. Most of it is done separately in parts, and then it's spliced, together afterwards. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. On the, I can remember on what album was it on Six. I spent most of the. It was a long hot summer, and I sat in my in my flat in Cardiff in my underpants recording the bass parts there on my own. So it's not as communal as it used to be, but obviously you still connect. And then after I did that, I literally emailed my bass parts off to Denmark. So it's not what it used to be, but we still everything still is real instruments, and everything is everything's not overly digitized, and there's no vocoders or there's no sort of vocal sort of splicing or editing or anything like that. So it's we try to keep it as old school as possible, but there's so much digital influence now that it's unless unless you've got millions behind the band, it's so expensive to record analog nowadays.
So where have you been touring around the world recently?
Well, we've just started the cycle of the the 40th anniversary of Power from Hell. We started off doing the 70,000 tons of metal cruise in the Caribbean. Then we've just done 3 shows in Scotland. that were absolutely crazy, fantastic. Next week we're in Europe for nearly 3 weeks. Then we've got a load of festivals. Then I think we're coming to Australia towards the end of the year, obviously.
Oh, that's something to look forward to. How do you find these cruises that seem to be quite common these days? I think there's one organised for Australia, but there's some critique about it's a lot of metalcore bands. But how do you find these cruises?
They're interesting. I find that it's the third time that we've done. This year was the third time that we've done the 70,000 tons cruise. I think I love the fact that there's no backstage, and all the bands are hanging around and with everyone else. And there's other activities like the jamming sessions and all that sort of thing. So as far as that's concerned, I think it's a great experience. But as a band playing there, and this is a personal sort of opinion, I find it a little frustrating because you're there to work, so you can't completely get into the vibe of it. You can't get completely smashed like everyone else. So you've got to keep focused, and that kind of, it's kind of like being the only sober person at a party and everybody's getting pissed. And you're the designated driver. You're having fun, but you're not having as much fun as everyone else.
Let's say, what are the plans for the future of Onslaught? What sort of things what are you planning to record in the future?
Well, we've got the this tour to come up for the year, and the new album, which is out in a few days. But we've just signed to Rain in Phoenix Records Music. Rain in Phoenix Music Records. And
pretty good. They send me a lot of stuff.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, no, they're absolutely fun. They're absolutely brilliant. We're absolutely loving working with them. It's just absolutely superb. But obviously we've got a few albums that we need to be working on for those. So next year we're looking at a new album, a new like proper studio album, and then we'll go out and tour that.
Right.
So yes, we've got another 3-5 albums at least coming.
Oh, something to look forward to. I was just thinking about the album cover again. How does the mood in England how is the mood in England now? A nicer place, or
it's got very. It's just funny you should say that. It's almost like history repeating itself to a degree. There's a lot more frustration now, I think, but because of the internet, it's a lot more widely reported. So I think people get their frustrations out being a keyboard warrior rather than going out on the streets and beating the shit up,
okay.
Or shit up. So I think that there's a different outlet for the violence or for the frustrations. But it's a similar thing. I don't think people are overly happy with the direction that the country's going in. I think people feel completely powerless, and it's it's frustrating. The politics at the moment just seems to be a bit of a mess.
Well, we've got a Labor government just elected here in Australia, so.
That's what we've got here, and I think a lot of people were expecting changes, and it hasn't really happened.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you very much for talking to us.
Absolute pleasure, my friends. And
yeah. Could I
I'm
get you?
glad you enjoyed my ramblings.
Absolutely, absolutely.